On a blizzard night, a deserted road echoed with the cries of wild animals. An elderly widow opened her door to 20 frozen wrestlers trembling in the stormy cold. She gave them soup, blankets, and food. They slept beside her hearth, guarded by her quiet bravery. At dawn, the valley trembled. Thousands of boots thundered across the road. And then, suddenly... Before I continue, let me know in the comments, have you subscribed to the channel or not? And also tell me which city and country you are watching from, so that I can thank you personally. The night felt as if nature itself had unleashed its fury on the world. The blizzard tore through the valley, clawing at everything in its path. The wind howled through the forest like a wounded beast in agony. Snowflakes, usually soft and gentle, were sharp as needles tonight, slashing across the skin like icy blades. On the deserted road, not a single lantern, not a single person, not a single sign of life, just the roar of the storm and the distant, terrifying screams of wild animals. At the far end of this lonely valley stood an old wooden house. Its windows were cracked, its roof worn and fragile in several places. Inside lived the elderly widow, Maria Hale, a woman whose sorrows had carved deep lines across her face, yet whose heart remained soft, warm, and quietly courageous. She knelt beside the fireplace, feeding wood into the flames, her woolen shawl wrapped tightly around her frail shoulders. Another night of silence. Another night of cold. Another night where the only voices she heard were the crackling fire and the forest's haunting cries. Her husband was gone. Her only son was gone. Their photos, their boots, their belongings still rested around the house, covered in dust but preserved in her memory. She had learned to survive with ghosts. But tonight was different. There was something menacing in the air, a strange heaviness, a warning wrapped in the wind. Suddenly the walls trembled violently, the window glass rattled, and then, thud, thud, thud. A loud knock at the door. Maria's heart lurched. No one ever came down this road, not for years, and certainly not in a storm like this. But the knocking came again, harder, more desperate. Terrified, yet gathering every ounce of courage, she slowly made her way to the door. The wind roared in her ears, and her heartbeat echoed loudly inside her chest. Her trembling hand reached for the handle. She pulled the door open and froze. Standing outside were 20 enormous wrestlers. Their clothes were covered in snow, their breaths heavy and broken. Their lips were turning blue, their hands shaking uncontrollably. Their eyes didn't hold fear, only exhaustion, hunger, and the brutal pain of freezing cold. They looked like they were moments away from collapsing. Their leader stepped forward, his voice barely coherent. "Ma'am, we got stranded. The truck overturned in the snow. We've been walking for hours. Please, we just need shelter for the night." For several seconds, Maria couldn't move. 20 massive men, strong, intimidating, complete strangers, and she was a frail old woman utterly alone. Fear tightened her chest, but then her humanity rose higher than her fear. The compassion inside her, the motherly warmth buried deep in her soul, awakened. She opened the door wider and said firmly, "Come inside. You'll freeze to death out there." One by one, the wrestlers stepped in, their bodies shaking. Snow melted off their clothes and dripped onto the wooden floor. The house was small, but that night it became a sanctuary. Maria hurried to warm soup, bring out bowls, fetch blankets. Some wrestlers were trembling so badly they could barely hold the cups. One young man burned with fever, another limped with a swollen ankle, another had deep scratches along his arm. Maria guided them toward the hearth. "This is my home," she said softly, "and tonight it is yours too." These giant, fearsome-looking men sat silently, Not a hint of aggression, only gratitude, pure, heartfelt gratitude. The house began to change. The cold retreated. Human warmth filled the small wooden room. Strength and vulnerability lived side by side. And then, from far across the valley came a deep, thunderous rumble, a sound so heavy it vibrated through the walls, as if thousands of footsteps marched through the snow. Maria stiffened and peered out into the storm. She had no idea what tomorrow morning would bring. The moment the wrestlers stepped inside, the cold seemed to retreat toward the walls. The warm glow of the fireplace spread a soft orange light across the small room. The 20 wrestlers, who had been battered by the storm just minutes ago, now sat quietly with their hands stretched toward the fire, as if feeling warmth for the first time in hours. Maria moved quickly, her steps unsteady, yet determined. Her hands weren't trembling from age tonight. They trembled from the compassion she felt for these strangers. She knew how brutally cold could break even the strongest men. She wanted, with all her heart, to make sure these travelers, these fighters, these young men survived the night. The scent of warm soup slowly filled the house. Maria brought out bowls, pouring them full and placing them gently into each wrestler's hands. Some of their fingers were so numb that they struggled to hold the bowls steady. One young wrestler whispered softly, "Ma'am, you're too kind. We're troubling you." Maria smiled gently. "Trouble is what burdens the heart," she replied. "You have brought warmth into this home." A wrestler with a fever sat shivering, his forehead damp with cold sweat. The moment Maria touched his skin, she recognized the severity of the temperature. She rushed to the kitchen, brewed an herbal tea she hadn't made in years, warmed a cloth, and placed it over his head with careful tenderness. The same skills she had once used to care for her husband and son now returned to her hands as naturally as breathing. One towering wrestler, whose expression usually carried a hard edge, spoke in a low, respectful voice. "None of us wanted to put you through this, ma'am, but we really had nowhere else to go." Maria shook her head kindly. "In hard times, only a human can help another human. Strength isn't only in muscles, it's in the heart too." The wrestlers exchanged glances. Perhaps it was the first time a stranger had spoken to them like this, with warmth, with dignity, with motherly softness. These men, who lived in the world of training, fighting, and unending discipline, were sitting before a fragile-looking woman whose heart was stronger than any of theirs. As the room grew warmer, their spirits slowly lifted. One wrestler spoke, guilt still lingering in his voice. "We were returning from a competition. The storm hit fast. The truck slipped, flipped, and we were scattered in the snow. We tried sending a message to the rest of our team, but we don't even know if it went through." Another added quietly, "We were afraid our people wouldn't be able to reach us. The roads are blocked. The snow is too deep." Maria listened intently. They were not just wrestlers. They were a brotherhood. They carried each other's injuries, fears, and hopes like a family marching through hardship. The fire crackled gently, casting shifting patterns on their faces. Under the glow, the truth of who they were began to show. Not just powerful athletes, but tired young men carrying emotional and physical wounds that the world rarely noticed. One wrestler suddenly lifted his head, glancing toward the window as if catching an unfamiliar sound. Another followed his gaze, stiffening slightly. A brief, uneasy silence settled over the room. Maria looked toward the window too, but she saw nothing. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Their leader answered quietly. "Just felt like there was movement out in the valley. Could be the rest of our group trying to find us." Maria frowned slightly. In this storm, How would anyone get here? The leader exhaled slowly. Our group is large, ma'am. If they decide to move, very little can stop them. Silence returned, gentle, thoughtful, but laced with tension. The wrestlers seemed calmer, yet their eyes held a shared question. Would everything truly be all right by morning? The fire's light flickered. The soup's aroma lingered gently. Outside, the icy wind still roamed the valley. And within that warm, fragile room, Maria felt a strange uneasiness rising in her chest, a whisper from her instincts. She didn't know it yet, but the morning would change everything. Night grew deeper. Outside, the snow still fell relentlessly, but inside the house an unusual calm had settled. The soft glow of the fireplace danced across the wrestlers' faces, faces that now showed not fear, but exhaustion and a growing sense of safety. One by one, their bodies warmed, and they wrapped themselves tightly in the blankets Maria had given them. Maria watched them quietly for a long time. Their powerful frames, broad shoulders, bruised hands, and tired breaths. Yet beneath all that strength, she could see a strange gentleness hiding. She realized the world saw only their power, but only they knew the weight of their vulnerabilities. The team captain, who looked the most composed and serious among them, moved closer to the fire and sat down slowly. He glanced at Maria and spoke in a soft, sincere tone. You saved us tonight. If you hadn't opened the door, some of us might not have made it. Maria gave him a faint smile. Saving a life is a duty of the heart, she said. I only did what my conscience allowed. The captain lowered his head respectfully. Then, as if finally finding someone who would truly listen, he began to speak, carefully, gradually. Ma'am, we're not just wrestlers. We're a family. When we travel, we rely on each other. These 20 here, they're my closest group. But behind us, there is a whole organization. Hundreds! Maria blinked in surprise. Do you think they would come looking for you in this storm? He paused for a moment before replying. If they knew we were in danger, yes, they would come. Maria's eyebrows tightened slightly. In weather this harsh? The captain exhaled slowly. Our people have one rule: no one is left behind. Whether the roads are blocked, whether the snow is too deep, whether the valley is dangerous, if they believe we need help, they'll find a way. The other wrestlers, half asleep but listening, began to stir. One lifted his head and said, They'll come. They always do. They'll break a path if they have to. Maria suddenly understood something. These men weren't just fighters. They were fiercely loyal, bound not by sport, but by brotherhood. The firelight flickered over their faces, some tense, some worried, some quietly thoughtful. One wrestler fixed his blanket, another stared at the window, another sat lost in memories. Their minds wandered to those still out there, teammates who might be trapped in the storm, yet determined to reach them. Gradually, the warmth of the room lulled most of them to rest. Their breaths became softer, more even. The house felt peaceful again, like a fragile bubble of warmth holding them safe from the raging world outside. But in Maria's heart, uneasiness stirred. She stood and moved toward the window. Lifting the curtain slightly, she peered out into the night. Snow covered everything. The wind still roamed freely, and the forest lay drowned in darkness. She could see no human movement, nothing but the stillness that comes with bitter cold. Yet something inside her whispered that the valley was not as quiet as it looked. Something was shifting out there, something heavy, slow, and purposeful. She sat down again, but sleep refused to come. The captain was still awake, staring into the fire. Without looking up, he spoke. Don't worry. Whatever happens, we will protect you first." Maria turned to him, surprised. "Me? I'm just an old woman. You are strong, capable. Why would you worry about me?" The captain looked at her with a gentle seriousness and replied, "Because you sheltered us, and we never forget kindness." Maria felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. After so many years of loneliness, someone had finally reminded her that she still mattered. Time passed slowly. The wrestlers slept. The fire burned low. The night thinned into deeper silence. But somewhere outside, far beyond the snowy darkness, there was movement in the valley. A presence, a force drawing nearer. Maria had no idea that in just a few hours, the world outside her door would transform completely. The first faint light of morning touched the snow, but the sunrise's softness never truly reached the valley. The cold air swallowed it before it could settle. After a long, silent night, the wrestlers slowly began to wake. Some stretched their stiff backs, some warmed their hands near the fire, and others rubbed sleep from their swollen, tired eyes. Maria prepared warm water and breakfast for them. There was a strange kindness floating in the air, as if the storm outside had shattered the world, but inside this tiny home, humanity had grown stronger. The captain sat near the door, tightening the laces of his boots. Looking at the frozen world outside, he murmured, "The roads won't be clear today either. The snow is too deep." Maria glanced out the window. The entire forest was drowned in a white blur. The road had vanished completely, swallowed by the night's heavy snowfall. Then suddenly, a moment came that changed everything. A faint vibration rippled through the ground, like something massive had stepped far away. A few seconds later, the vibration returned, deeper, heavier. The wooden house quivered ever so slightly. Snow slid down the window pane in tiny rivers. One wrestler stood abruptly. "Did you all feel that?" Another nodded. "I did. Something shook the ground." "What was that?" Maria stared at the door with rising uneasiness. A silent fear bloomed inside her, a fear she had not felt in years. The tremors grew, not violently, but steadily. And now the sound accompanying them became clear, a rhythmic, collective thumping, far away, yet powerful enough to be felt through the floorboards. The captain rose slowly, his expression turning sharp. "That's footsteps," he said quietly. "And there are many." A distant commanding shout echoed through the valley, faint, carried by the slicing wind, but unmistakable. Someone was coming, not one, not 10. Hundreds. Maria opened the door carefully. The sight outside stole her breath. Down the long, snow-covered path were rows upon rows of massive figures, dark jackets, broad shoulders, heavy boots striking the snow in perfect rhythm. A formation so huge it looked endless. Hundreds of wrestlers. The sound wasn't just noise. The ground itself was trembling under the synchronized force of their march. The valley pulsed like a beating heart. One of the wrestlers inside Maria's home gasped, "They found us! They actually found us!" One by one, all 20 wrestlers rushed to the doorway, their faces lit with disbelief, relief, and overwhelming emotion. The approaching group was no ordinary team. It was the full organization the captain had spoken of. Not dozens, probably hundreds, maybe more. All coming for one purpose, to find their 20 missing brothers. The scene was unbelievable, a powerful community, a moving wall of strength, loyalty, and unity, pushing through the snow to reach the stranded. A few senior wrestlers from the massive group stepped forward. Their expressions carried worry, anger, and fierce affection. One of them approached Maria. He placed a hand over his chest and spoke with deep respect. "You sheltered our brothers. We will never forget this kindness." Maria stood speechless. So many people, such immense strength, and she, a frail old woman. Yet they looked at her with sincere gratitude, almost reverence. The captain turned to her and said softly, "I told you, didn't I? If they decide to come, nothing can stop them." Maria's knees felt weak. She looked out at the army-like formation, at the endless rows of men standing in the snow, all because of the 20 souls she had protected. It was a sight she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. But what she didn't know was this: the real gratitude, the real repayment of kindness, the real transformation of her world, was only about to begin. The valley, still trembling from the arrival of the massive wrestling brotherhood, slowly grew quiet again. Hundreds of wrestlers stood outside Maria's small wooden home, their breaths rising like smoke in the icy air. The 20 inside, once frozen, exhausted, desperate, now stood proudly at the doorway, overwhelmed by the sight of their people filling the snowy plains. Maria stepped out carefully, the cold biting at her frail hands, but her eyes stayed locked on the endless rows of faces looking back at her with gratitude. The captain walked up beside her. "They came for us," he said softly, "just like I knew they would." But even he looked stunned at how many had made the journey. Within minutes, the group spread into motion, not with chaos, but with discipline. The senior wrestlers lifted their hands and gave brief commands. Men peeled off in organized lines, moving with practiced precision. One group headed toward the road, another toward the roof, another toward the barn, and a smaller group approached Maria with a wooden crate of tools. The captain turned to her. "You sheltered us when we had nothing," he said. "Now let us return what you gave." Before Maria could protest, they began. Her roof, battered by years of storms, was suddenly alive with movement. Wrestlers climbed up with ropes and planks, scraping off snow, repairing the broken edges, strengthening beams, hammering wood with practiced ease. The sound was steady and confident, each strike filled with purpose. Others cleared the pathway, shoveling massive piles of snow with speed and strength, far beyond anything a normal person could manage. In less than an hour, a road that had been buried all night was carved open like a clean, shining river of ice. Some repaired her fence, setting new posts, tying wire, straightening broken boards with gentle care despite their huge hands. Inside the house, 2 wrestlers gathered firewood, stacking it neatly by the wall, enough to last her for weeks. Another pair brought in food supplies from the main group: packets, cans, dried fruit, and warm bread wrapped in cloth. One of them placed a small insulated bag in her hands. "You'll need this for the winter, ma'am." Maria stared at them, speechless. These men who could easily shatter walls in the ring were treating her home, her life, her needs with the tenderness of sons. As she watched them work, tears began to form in her eyes. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. A wrestler, broad shoulders, shaved head, intimidating at first glance, approached her gently. "My mother passed away last year," he said quietly. "Today, you reminded me of her." Maria's breath caught. She reached out and touched his arm, and he bowed his head respectfully, eyes stinging. Meanwhile, in the center of the group, the highest-ranking wrestler, the organization's leader, stepped forward. He carried something wrapped in deep red cloth. When he reached Maria, he unfolded it. A championship belt, gold polished, leather shining, engraved with the names of champions from decades past. "This," he said, "is our highest symbol of respect. Only a handful of people in the world have been given one without stepping into the ring." He placed it gently into her hands. "You saved 20 champions. You protected our family. From today, you are part of ours." Maria shook her head in disbelief. I didn't do anything special, I just opened a door. The leader smiled softly. That's what special people always say. As the repairs finished, the wrestlers lined up in formation once more. The snow sparkled beneath their boots, and the valley looked transformed. Alive, strong, protected. The captain stood in front of her one last time. "You will never be alone again, Maria," he said. "You have 20 sons now, and hundreds more behind them." Maria wiped her tears, her heart full in a way it had not been for decades. The wrestlers raised their fists to their chests in a silent salute. Then, with disciplined unity, they turned and began their march, boots pressing into the snow like rolling thunder. Maria watched them disappear into the white horizon, her hands wrapped around the championship belt, her home no longer a place of loneliness, but a symbol of life, love, and extraordinary kindness. Her world had changed, forever. In a world growing colder every day, remember this: kindness still has the power to shake mountains and warm entire communities. One elderly widow opened her door to 20 freezing strangers, and the whole valley witnessed what true humanity looks like. If this story touched your heart, then become part of this mission. Spread compassion, protect the vulnerable, and always choose kindness, even when no one is watching. Like this video to push this message forward. Subscribe for more powerful storytelling. Share this story so kindness reaches someone who needs it. Comment humanity first if you believe compassion still matters. Turn on notifications to never miss the next life-changing story.